here on a Friday in July where it's hot as can be. And we have an echo, but that's okay too. This is Litvak Leadership Live, episode 145. Oh my, how the time has come by. And I've got my special guest today, Stephen Robertson, with me. Stephen, how are you today?
Sean, thank you for having me. I loved that kind of reggae feeling on the beach music that did the countdown. That made my day. Thank you.
Perfect. So before we get into questions and discussions, I just want to remind everyone, if you haven't liked Litvak Leadership on Facebook and on YouTube, please go there, like it, ring the bell so you get notified of all of our posts on both websites. And a special announcement, tomorrow I am going to be speaking live and in person at 9 a.m. at the Evangel World Prayer Center in Louisville at the Men's Ministry Breakfast, and there will not be feedback like we're experiencing now, hopefully. And it's going to be good food, good fellowship, and I've got a word for the men. So if you're a man anywhere in the tri-state area, yes, I'm calling Ohio part of us, I want to encourage you to come out to Louisville, Kentucky, to Evangel World Prayer Center for breakfast and hear what I have to lay on the men tomorrow. It's going to be an encouragement. So without further ado, my guest today is Steve Robertson, CEO of Experiences for Life in Bold Summers. Steve, tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your background in about a minute, and then we'll get into some questions.
Thank you, Sean. Arrived via South Africa to Philadelphia 22 years ago with my family. Have been really fortunate and excited to be involved in the next generation for all of those years, and actually even before. Next generation, what I mean by that is we've been in a space where we create summer programs and run summer programs around the country for high school and middle school aged kids. And that's the space we've been in for 22 years, which has grown my love for the next generation immensely.
So what got you into that?
It's so funny. I came to Philadelphia as a tennis professional. My background is a little bit in tennis, and I played a little bit. Before coming here, I owned a business in South Africa, and it was also targeted at the youth. So my passion's always been around the youth. Their energy and their vibrance has been something I've always been drawn to. My wife's a teacher. I studied teaching, never actually taught, but ended up teaching in other ways. And so it's always been something that we've been really passionate about, being around the youth and kind of being a part of their growth and their development. And it's a two-way street. They've encouraged and inspired us along the way.
So, but what was, and I'm playing with the microphone to see if I can fix the echo, and that just made it worse, actually. So let me go back to what I was doing. Apologize for all the issues here with the microphone today. Maybe this will make it better. Hopefully. Okay, we'll try that. Wow. Have not had issues like this in quite some time. We'll see if this works. But anyway, so you are training, teaching, augmenting the education in the summers for millennials and Gen Z and even younger. You know, you've got your website for Experiences for Life. Tell us about that, because you go from Experiences for Life into Bold Summers.
Yeah, so it's a fascinating journey. I think that when we look at the next generations, we're talking about, for the most part, people under the age of 25. So we're talking about Alpha generation and Gen Z. The ESF targets students that are in pre-K all the way through middle school and even into high school. Bold Summers focuses heavily on high school style programming and preparing people for pre-college. And so the idea is to have almost a from cradle to career type journey. And one of the things that's really fascinating about the generations that we're dealing with right now is, unlike millennials who end up working for us because they're not going to camp anymore, they're a little older than that.
Right.
Millennials are 26 to 40 in that range. Unlike millennials that really enjoyed hanging out, we've got a generation that is highly competitive and understands that the workforce of tomorrow is going to require people to be the best that they can be. And so we've got a group of students that are more than 90% choosing to spend their free time in an upskill style fashion. So they want to learn either fashion, or they want to know medicine, or they want to learn how to swim, or they want to learn how to play tennis, but they're investing their free time in a way that millennials didn't. And it's not good or bad, it just is, but it's amazing. And so for us, giving an opportunity to upskill in whatever fashion or form you want to, whether it is learning a soft skill, whether it's learning socializing, whether it's learning a skill like social media, photography, computers, whatever it is, that's the business we're in, is creating those opportunities for students from around the world.
Now, when our kids were younger, they were involved in the NCFCA, which is the Homeschool Speech and Debate League. So we augmented what we were doing. And it sounds like you're augmenting what these kids are doing also. Aren't there always, though, going to be some kids that just aren't interested in learning in the summers? How do you reach them?
I mean, that's a really good point. No matter what I say about any of the generations we're talking about now, it's a generalization, right? And so the data we have, and there's an immense amount of incredible data that'll blow your mind. There's immense amount, but there's always outliers, and each person is always an individual. We've got to remember that, right? And needs to be treated as such. And I really believe that, and it's something we care about. So yes, there's always a group of people that are not interested in the summer experience and or growth. And so how to reach them, in order for you to spend time in or around any of the programming we offer, you have to have an interest in being there. Our business, like any business, is focused in a specific area. And so, for example, if you don't like coffee, you don't go to Starbucks.
Right.
So for the kids who don't want to be involved in a summer experience, that's something that then obviously we wouldn't reach them. However, through the pandemic, there has been an incredible move towards the virtual opportunities. And even now we have an amazing virtual opportunities. In fact, the reason ESF and Bold Summers started a conversation was around e-games or esports. And that's where our first conversation started, trying to figure out what is esports and why is it okay? And we were busy telling parents that it is okay to be involved in esports. In fact, there's some really powerful upskills in esports. And so that's kind of how that conversation started. My point was, there are a group of kids that we can't always reach, but you'll be surprised. We're starting to reach people we didn't think we could reach. And we also are able to reach people around the world that can't travel right now, which has been amazing.
So, and when we had started our conversation before the show started, you had talked about how, royalty has sent their children to your program, influencers and movie stars and musicians have sent their children. What is it about your program that entices both those groups and regular people?
So I mean, Sean, that's such a great question, and it's so hard to answer. Any of those people, which we've had all of those and more, that have spent time with us, we've never gone out of our way to put them kind of in the limelight. People have chosen our programs because they have wanted to be amongst like-minded people, people that are really motivated, and that has been the deciding factor. And what ends up happening is when you have incredibly bright students from around the world that wanted to learn something very specific or in particular, then you end up having this incredible group of people together. And when you look through them, you realize, wow, some of them that are represented, they are representing families that are well known. But for us, the bigger thing is that it's a group of students that are really into what they're learning. And so some of the programs that we partner with universities are admission-based programs. So you can't just apply and get in. You can't just get in, you have to apply to get in. And so what you end up having is these incredible programs with very smart kids. In some cases, some of them are open enrollment, but just the way it shakes out, you have this incredible mix of students from not only around the world, from incredible families. And it doesn't always have to be a specific kind of family because we have students literally from every walk of life. So it's usually the quality of the experience and the desire to experience something specific that draws people to one of our specific programs. And we have a range, so it's not just one program. There's multiple programs.
So on your website, StephenJRobertson.com, you've got here that Gen Z is inheriting this world. Steve is dedicated to preparing everybody for this shift, and that's a change I'm on board with. Isn't it every generation inherits the world and there's a shift?
So no, I one second. Let me say this, that without getting too deep into the granular conversation of data here, I mentioned to you before that this generation is our world changes, and we would say that about many generations, but there is such an incredible mix of what has transpired for this generation to be and look and operate as they are, that they are truly not only reinventing as they go. Think about it as 3D printing on demand. They're 3D printing on demand the world as they want to see it. And the inheriting from other generations, I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, so forgive me, that generational divide has never been greater than it is now. And I think what leaders and parents alike are realizing, unfortunately more slowly than I would like, is that they're realizing that they're just the right that they feel as parents and leaders in people's lives does not qualify them to speak into those lives anymore. And so what we've got is a generation that are designing a world without the older generation's input. And the older generations haven't fully realized that yet. And when they do fully realize it and come alongside the younger generation, I call it GPS. When you become a GPS for the younger generation, a guide positioned by the side, not like this coach is barking orders, then you have the ability to influence not only the generation, but the heritage of what they've inherited. So forgive the tangent. I hope that made sense. That makes sense.
It makes sense, but and I hear what you're saying. I agree with it to a certain extent, but I look at my life, both how my father became incredibly ignorant, and then as I got older, he started to get smarter. And
I love that.
My children, who are Gen Z, 26 and 23, Dad was a genius. Dad is old-fashioned, and now, I fluctuate on which side of the road I'm walking on. Am I a genius or am I old-fashioned? Do I have unique insight or do I just not get it? You talk about Gen Z is forging into the world without the benefit of looking at generations past. Doesn't that happen all the time?
You could argue that, Sean. Here's the difference. So that's a fair point. I think any generation always looks down at the generation that's following them and says, "Oh, we never used to do that." Let me tell you. Here's the difference. Gen Z, no, they're incredibly smart. They are incredibly smart. We just know more than they do, and that's the distinction. So you must understand this. Growing up, when I was 23, I knew everything, kind of what you're saying now. When I was 27, I realized now I know everything. When I was 30, I realized I know everything. And while you're on that journey, the input that you receive, the legacy passed down of knowledge and wisdom from the previous generation, there is always a segment in time that is stilted and halted. So you're correct in saying that. However, what research is showing and what we've truly seen, that is, if older generations don't figure out how to bridge this gap, they don't figure out how to see this generation with a new lens, what's going to end up happening is that divide is never going to be closed. And usually it has been closed, but there have been a number of technology advances, there have been a number of advances or changes in leadership and parenting that have put us in a place today that divide won't just naturally come together like it has in the past, and that it potentially could never come together again. And what will happen really quickly is that the older generations will become irrelevant really, really quickly. The
Right.
younger generations will determine the path of not only communication, but how businesses run. They already are determining how marketing is done, how products are sold, what products are made. We don't even understand that fully yet. And so I'm suggesting to you that because of technology, Gen Z does not feel or see yet the need for older generations because they could truly live without the older generations. Now, would they learn a lot of things the hard way? Absolutely. But right now, there isn't a foreseeable need for the older generations.
So, and if I don't interrupt you occasionally, I won't have any more questions. So,
go ahead.
I'm not trying to be rude, but I want to leap off on something. In the janitorial industry in which I'm in, that if you want to recruit staff, you should not have anyone recruiting that is older than 30. Everyone needs to be a millennial or Gen Z that is recruiting for you because they understand social media where anyone who's 31 and over doesn't. Okay, fair enough. But what you're talking about is that the younger generation can go on and move forward without the older generation. And if the older generation doesn't do something about it, that's what will happen. But, you and I talked about being faith men before we started this conversation. And in the Bible, it talks about how the older generation, for both men and women, are to train those that are younger. And there's many ways to train people, but it's incumbent on that older generation to reach out and make that happen. So is it not, that is what I am saying is that it's not the issue with the younger generation. It's with the older generation abdicating on their responsibility because they don't get an immediate response. What say you?
I say yes. I also say that it's the tools that the older generation needs to employ to connect with the younger generation are tools that have never been seen or used before. And so it is, there are a number of things that we talk about when we're teaching in the space. We talk about an 8-second filter. We talk about a curated stream. We talk about a number of things in that we're talking about Gen Z being CEOs of their own lives, their whole lives from early days. And so once the older generation sees some of those mechanisms that are no longer just do it like it was, because that is not yielding the same results. And that's the point, really. You can sow, as it were, into the younger generation, and you realize that you're not getting a crop. That's what's happening right now, because you're sowing the same seed as you always have from generation to generation. And I'm suggesting to you, a new seed is required. The responsibility, I believe 100% yes, is accurate. And what happens if that journey is traveled well? If you truly become the GPS, the guide positioned by their side, as opposed to like barking marching orders, really, then what happens is you get into someone's curated stream, you get into their curated stream, and you are now in a position to influence them. So you've earned the right and the trust
Sure.
to get into your own child's life, your own employee's life, and to influence them. This is not manipulation.
Sales.
This is
sales.
Right.
You've got to earn the right to be a social influencer everywhere in life. That's why I tell people all the time, everyone is in sales. They just don't realize it.
Correct. And so the customer has changed. So if you're in sales, and I think you've said it well, if you realize that your customer is different, and that's the premise of my book, is that the first and foremost thing I'm really interested in people getting is a new lens. If you have the new lens, then you see the customer has changed. And once you see the customer has changed, John, you said it well, now you know how to engage and impact and influence and guide and do the things that an older generation should truly be carrying the responsibility for the younger generation. They don't know what they don't know yet. As I said, they're crazy smart. They just don't know as much as we do. And they don't know that yet, right?
Well, and you talk about being CEO of your own life. And there is a Facebook group by Steve Weatherford that's got like 4,000 members. And I guess Steve Weatherford and anyone who's into sports is going to say, how do you not know this? Is, I believe, a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Shows how well I know my sports. He is leading a group and leading a movement to be CEO of your own life. And again, people in the past would stick with a company for years and years and years and get a gold watch and get a pension. And that doesn't happen anymore. My generation started not staying with the same company the whole time, but maybe having a handful of jobs. And now they're saying that this next generation, the Millennials and Gen Z, could have 20 different jobs across their lifetime and keep changing careers. Why do you think that is?
Okay, so you touched on a couple of really interesting things there. First of all, let me just say this. CEO of your own life could be a really positive thing. CEO of your life as a child growing up, really what that addresses and speaks to is that you determine what comes in, what comes out. People are there in a weird way to serve you. And if you look at the journey of a child all the way through preschool, school, high school, college, everything is set to serve you. What do you want to study? When do you want to eat? When must your Uber arrive? Would you like to do your PhD or thesis on this? Would you like to do it on that? Then they come into the workplace, and all of a sudden now they have roles have changed.
You will sit in your chair and you will answer the phone and type on a computer for 8 hours.
No. So let me share. So that's part of the dilemma. But listen to this. The World Economic Forum did some research, and it was in 2016. And they published some paper that referenced a statistic that said in today's time, so 2016 feels like 100 years ago, right? In today's time, students entering middle school, 65% of them will work in jobs that do not yet exist. Okay, so now you tell me, why is there a generation that is always looking for what's next? Why is there a generation that is struggling to plug into school? Why is there a generation that is struggling to listen to in some cases, adults? Why is there? Because we can't even tell them how to future-proof for tomorrow. We don't even know how to prepare them yet for when they graduate, what it is they're going to do, because those jobs don't exist today. There's some data around, I think it's 2035, if I'm not mistaken. The data speaks about 40% of current white-collar jobs will not exist. Okay, so we are preparing a generation to go into a world that has never existed before. We aren't even up to date, up to speed with the world as it is today. Gen Z is, because they've never known a world other than this, right? So they are the super users, and we start to see why they're so siloed, why they're so lonely, why their social skills are so underdeveloped, and why they want to change jobs. We're in a seasonal business, 1,200, 1,300 employees this summer. Right. 2,000 next summer. I cannot tell you how many people have started working with us this summer, and we have people all the way from early college through, and I can't tell you how many have arrived 2 days into jobs, saying into summer programs, saying, "Yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm resigning." Why? Because they haven't experienced any kind of problem solving. They haven't grown in the space of perseverance and grit. They don't really know how to communicate in the same way. 35% of their communication is digital, right? They are reinventing how communication will happen in the future. And we wonder, why do they not stay in a job? So I'll give you a silly example. An 18-year-old girl has an Instagram account. All she does is she raises puppies and sells them. You pay her through Venmo. She has a 6-figure income at the age of 18, has no employees, doesn't answer to anybody. And what does she do? She's figured out how to leverage selling puppies, and she makes a living. Well, why would you not choose to do what you want to when you can? The gig economy has given people an opportunity to drive for Uber. They've given people a chance to deliver groceries. They've given people a chance to do SAT prep online, leverage your skills, become a YouTube influencer. And we're saying, go and study for 4 years and then go and get your MBA, and then good luck paying back your student loans. By the way, I'm pro going to college. I'm just suggesting, we're wondering why they're changing jobs, because they can.
Well, and there's an article that came out the other day, and I should have prepared it for our broadcast, that some organizations are saying 95% of the workforce is looking for a new job at this moment because of COVID. Correct. That if they're not fulfilled, they're looking at their life, and some businesses are saying you must go back to the office. Other businesses that are saying you don't have to are poaching people in those, similar industries. And some people are saying, I don't like what I've been doing the last 10 years, and I've learned all these new skills. Why don't I do something with it and figure it out? I mean, this is truly an opportunity that no other generation has faced. I will give you that.
Yeah, and I totally agree. The truth is, when you look at it, we are truly entering a new era. And I think what we're navigating right now is that Wild West space between two eras where the transition is happening. I don't know if you've heard the scientific reports that at some point the North Pole was the South Pole and the South Pole was the North Pole. The Earth toppled in space, apparently, and if you look at the magnetic fields, there's proof of that. That whole toppling, I believe, is happening now, and the world we will live in tomorrow is truly going to be a world that none of us have imagined. And the people that are currently best suited to navigate that world are the next generation. And I think what's happening is that the older generations are trying to still hang on because it's hard to predict what tomorrow is going to look like, right? So nobody really knows, but we have this sense. It's this kind of this uneasy sense that things are just crazy right now. And so I think everybody's aware of that. What makes it hard is we don't really know what tomorrow is going to look like. And the journey I think that we're on in this call of changing human era, I think is rewriting all the norms. And so when you look at work as we know it, I think companies, while there's a huge push to be in person for certain reasons, I do believe that it won't only be in person. I think hybrid will be the result out of this. I don't think there's already studies on the in person versus the virtual, and I think hybrid's going to be the way to go for a number of reasons. But if you want to stay in the market and attract employees and retain the best talent, and if you're not looking at rewiring the workplace in some ways, if you're not looking at how you use social media to communicate who you are before your employees are looking for employees. So you're already using social media to explain to your customers who you are so that they apply to work for you when they become, of age. That there's this massive transition happening. And I do think that with automation, with AI, when we unpack that technology, most people say, yeah, I get it, but you don't. Until you really deep dive into what's going on in AI and technology, you don't get how intensely exciting and fast it is.
And I hear, why am I blanking on his name? Mark, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks.
Oh, Cuban?
Mark Cuban, because I listen to Evan Carmichael videos constantly when I'm walking my dog. And I keep hearing Mark Cuban talking about how he is studying AI, where he's gone on to Amazon and taken courses. I guess they're on Amazon. I'm sure they're on LinkedIn too, where he is studying AI because so much is going to be AI that he realizes, even him being a billionaire and the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, he needs to understand it to be able to keep up with what is coming. So when all these people come and talk to him, he has a response. Now, it kind of reminds me of, and there's still people like this, they are, during COVID, they were saying, I'm just going to wait for things to get normal. And now that we're either emerged or emerging or headed into the Delta variant, depending which slice of the banana you're choosing to eat at the moment, there's still people that think everything is going to be how it used to be. And A, I don't get those people, and B, what have you done the last year to improve your skills? Because I know people that now that things have leveled out are acting like everything's going to be the way that it always was. And I don't think it's ever going to be like it was again.
Sean, you're right. It's never going to be. And I mean, the truth is really simple. You look back in history, and as you look forward, it has never been the same, right? It is always changing. I think if you understand Moore's law, although it has to do with capacitors and transistors, really, the doubling time of technology if you look at what the doubling time of technology has done over the years, if you talk about a computer chip, how quickly it's doubled over 2 years, and then it just doubles and doubles and doubles. And at some point, it's just incredible. So the analogy I like to use is, if I could build a computer and every day I could work on it and double its capacity, for the first day, I'd do it. Second day, I'd do it. Eventually, a week, 2 weeks in, it still doesn't look particularly different. It doesn't operate particularly different. In fact, it's not that much different in terms of power. And then again, I double the capacity and the power, and I double it. And all of a sudden, one day, I'm blown away, right? So that's what the doubling time looks like. And that's what's going on with technology right now. We're at a point now where the doubling time is so intense that all of a sudden, the tipping point will happen and everything will be different. Already almost my entire house speaks to me through my phone. Almost everything: my washer, my dryer, my heating, my cooling, my cameras, you name it. I can do it all. My refrigerator, everything can do it. My car, everything speaks to me. And
sure.
and so you think about life being the same. It can't. We've got a generation, 42% of the world under the age of 25. They have never lived in our old world, and they will never live in that world. So to expect it to go back to that it's irrational, considering that if you look back in history, the 25 and youngers have always been the one that have written tomorrow. They are always the ones that are dictating what will happen, where we will go, how we will get there, how we will buy, sell, all those things. It's amazing.
So did you hear that Israel had launched a group of drones recently, and it was fully I know someone flipped the switch, obviously, to launch them, but their target, it gave them some parameters, but their target, their approach, their attack, when to fire, completely AI driven without human engagement. A, how cool. B, how horrifying. I just think of the movie The Terminator, and I feel like we're inching towards Skynet.
We are. And I mean, I love the concept. I'm like you. It's two sides of the same coin. It's spectacular and it's frightening. I mean, Elon Musk said we need regulation of AI, and he's in that space incredibly. And I think the reality is, for most of the me's in the world that are just the average person, the parts that I try and take away from this is understanding that tomorrow is going to be really different, and making sure that I'm not stuck in my ways. Now, there's some ways that are really good, and from a business perspective, from a parenting perspective, from a leadership perspective, but always being cognizant of the fact that the change is happening really quickly, and it's not just changing for the sake of change, but your customer is needing to be communicated with in a different way. And so I try and focus on kind of the day-to-day type interactions, more so than what's going to happen with that AI if it gets loose and destroys the world. And we start having, those movies come to reality, primarily because that's all I can influence. And I do think that it can be paralyzing when you think about the concepts. When you see a movie like Terminator and you're like, what's going to happen? And then you can be paralyzed by that. But I do believe that we have a real role to play in that entire journey. And part of that role has got to do with how we, as we've already said, engage with the younger generation. Part of that role is how committed we are, like Mark Cuban, to upskilling all the time, because our relevance is in question. And if we aren't able to speak influence, if we aren't able to speak technology fluently, right, then we won't be relevant in tomorrow. We've all got those grandparents that when you come over to their house, they want you to figure out how to change the channel on the TV. And you're like, come on. Well, fast forward that to today, where technology is just amplified, and you realize how incredibly important it is to be connected. Whether you like it or not, you have to be connected to stay relevant, because the world is moving so quickly.
Oh, I've set up, and I am not heavily into Instagram like I have a feeling you are, but I have a personal Instagram account and a Litvak Leadership Instagram account. And I keep trying to connect Litvak Leadership on Instagram to Litvak Leadership on Facebook, and it won't let me. And I feel like an idiot, although I have the two Sean Litvak accounts connected. And every Gen Z that I've talked to about it, their answer has been the same. Well, what's the big deal? Just post twice. It's like, no, the technology is there. Tell me how to fix it. And they can't do it. Because like you said, I think I heard someone once say, it's not that this generation is genius. They just know how to find stuff fast.
Yeah, they problem. So I told you earlier that they're lacking in really 4 areas. They're lacking in problem solving. They're lacking in gratitude. They're lacking in communication and perseverance. Comparative to other generations, it's not like it's devoid. It's just a muscle that isn't as well developed as previous generations. The problem with problem solving is they figured out. I think it was Bill Gates who said, "Give a lazy man something to do because he'll get it done really quickly." Right, which I thought was hysterical. And so Gen Z has figured out how to bypass, get the cheat codes, get to the result really, really quickly. But what you lose in that journey is the problem-solving ability, right? And so because they have access to all knowledge, I think about it this way. A friend of mine, Dean Menudo, who I adore, a great public speaker, he trains on sales, incredible speaker. He's really into music, and he always reminds me that he has access to every song ever written and played, because now we have access to it in a second on our phone, right? For 99 cents or for whatever it costs you a month, right?
Spotify, done.
Right. So you've got it all. And so when you look at this now, Gen Z has access to all knowledge at the drop of a hat. So when you think about problem solving, if this doesn't work, we'll just go to something else. We won't necessarily practice that skill of how do you now figure this thing out. And again, I don't know that it's good or bad. The future is probably going to be more heavily laden with that kind of a skill set, that kind of an outcome required than problem solving. And so that's the change that we start to see happening, where we value communication face-to-face, stand up, shake your hands. These people value communicating digitally. We'll say, no. When you look at the studies, they start to talk to you about language as we know it, communication as we know it, is being rediscovered in a way that is different, right? Emojis are an example of that. And so we can hang on to it, no, thee and thou and this and that. It just doesn't matter, because just like there are, I don't know how many languages that are completely extinct now, that have just disappeared from the face of the earth. So certain things that we cling to are no longer going to be there, because it's a simple thing, is that the majority of the generations or the majority of the population that do something, that is going to be the behavior that works. And so we have to pay attention to where they are and what they're doing. We can't always shake a finger like, oh, they're so bad. We've got to stay connected and understand. Now, can we help them coach and guide? I hope so. But they are truly the ones that are writing tomorrow. We've got to make sure we're reading so that we can be part of that journey.
So when you talk about them having all this knowledge, where does the foundation come in? You and I talked briefly about faith before we started today. I mean, without someone having a faith-based foundation, having access to all knowledge of everything that has occurred, I think there is an opportunity for people to be misled very easily and swayed into something that they, wouldn't want to be, and almost be brainwashed. Where do you think is the place for faith as a foundation in all of this?
So, Sean, this is something that my business is a secular business, and so I don't often speak about this component of my life. But if faith means something to you, and you follow Christianity, whatever it ends up being, right? You'll see really, really quickly that in just about every religion, there's talk about a time where the good and evil come and there's a clash, right? For want of a better analogy.
Book of Revelation, let's go there.
Right. And so when you look at the spirit of this new age, when you look at what's going on, it is really clear from a spiritual perspective to me what is going on, why this is happening, why they're so siloed, why they're so lonely, why this is the first post-Christian generation we've ever encountered. When you look at
post-Christian,
every generation before that was majority Christian generation. This is the first generation that's post-Christian. They are not Christians. And when you see the research on, for example, Christianity, you'll see that There have never been more self-proclaiming atheists. There have never been more people that actually don't even have a grid for Christianity and or spiritual things. It's amazing. And primarily because what's happening now is it's the you do you and I'll do me, and we don't infringe on one another. And so when you take a step back and look at the spiritual view of this, it's been predicted and we know it's coming. And that's partly why I have a lot of opportunities to speak to church leadership around this in the faith space, just to share some thoughts about how do you reach this generation, because I get really choked up because we could lose an entire generation if we don't figure out how to engage, connect, and influence them well, right? And so to your point, I don't believe that faith of any kind really has a foundation in Gen Z and Alpha's lives, which makes it, for those people that care about faith, incredibly important to figure out how to produce opportunities to show that faith is real, to show that it's something that we believe in, because it's not just look what I do and do what I do because I tell you. It's not just I'm born a Christian, so therefore I'll be a Christian. That is gone. I mean, it's literally, it's not even in the rearview mirror anymore. So for those people that care about faith, they have to figure out how to show the authenticity of faith. And when you look at a lot of what's going on in the Christian and a whole lot of religious circles, there's a lot of fingers that can be pointed, like, you want me to be part of that? Look at what their history is. Look at what they've done. Look at what they do to kids. Look at how they embezzle. Look at how they adulterous. So you've got all this news that
right
generation is looking at, and they're like, so that's what you want me to be? So you've got, it's this perfect storm, again, for want of a better term, of truly what I believe is foretold in just about every religious generation, of this coming of an age where, the good and evil are coming closer to having a clash. Now, I don't want to be too spiritual about it, but yeah, that's the way.
We talk about spiritual things on Litvak Leadership. I mean, I'll tell you something I did today, which is something I've really never done before. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, I'm, speaking tomorrow live and in person at Evangel World Prayer Center to the men's ministry, having breakfast. And I had created a video about that today as I was out walking the dog. And you've seen the videos where people then take their video and they put a headliner above it and subtitles below it. Well, I posted that on Facebook, sent it to a bunch of people, hundreds, matter of fact, to, get some more people there. And then I thought, you know what? I put it on LinkedIn and sent it to probably 80 people, all in the Louisville area, 80 men, because it's a men's ministry thing. And I think it's to reach that generation, to reach that Gen Z and millennial generation. I think those of us that are not in that generation are going to have to wear our faith more on our chest than we've been comfortable with in the past.
I love that, and I love it on a number of levels. It feels to me like through the whole pandemic, there's been a cleansing of institutions, there's been a cleansing of churches, there's been a cleansing of hearts, and there's been a cleansing even of identity. And I think one of the biggest struggles for Gen Z is truly identity. They face, from a spiritual perspective, they face four spiritual giants. The one is they're a fatherless generation. And I don't just mean father or mother, I just mean they're an unparented generation, and they're not a generation that's plugged into, in my faith, God the Father. And so they're a fatherless generation. And I can unpack that more, I won't for right now. The second thing is they're a generation that has a foundation in fear. And I can explain that to you out of what's going on in the world and just kind of world news. Mean world syndrome, studied in the 70s, talks about irrational fear of the world around you. And you multiply that by what's going on in the news. And so the second spiritual giant is fear. And then the third one is truly identity. And so what we've got is a generation.
Wait. The third one is what?
Identity.
Okay.
And so what we have here is we've got a generation that's growing up, and they're trying on new identities all the time. I have a certain identity that I wear for you. I have a certain identity that I wear for you. I have a certain identity in this place and in this place. And while people think that that's good, what ends up happening is that there's this restlessness there's a sense of always becoming. So there's this concept of always becoming, which goes back to Greek philosophers, is just that you can never get to a place of peace and rest because you're always striving for something different, to be validated, to be included, to be approved, to whatever it is, right? So those are the three spiritual giants. And when you have that, a true identity, as Christians claim that they have, is when you have that identity and you don't live in fear, but you live in faith, and when you do know who the Father is and you're plugged in that way, all of a sudden the paradigm shifts immensely. But what has to happen for this generation it's important for us to realize that, to understand that that's what they're navigating. And that's why it's so hard to have a faith conversation, because those are monsters. Those are giants for a reason, right?
Right. What was number 4?
There wasn't a fourth. There was only 3.
Oh, okay. I thought you said there were 4.
Forgive me if I said 4. I meant there was. Well, no. There's more. Those are the 3 that I usually focus on, because those are things that are impactful. I'm sure there's more. Okay. And so our responsibility, what I've seen is where faith is truly walked out, there is power and there's fruit, right? And so where people see that there's fruit and that there's power, and I don't mean power in a manipulative way, they cannot resist. When the kingdom of heaven comes crashing into a situation, nobody can be the same. But what we're not showing them enough is that. So I agree entirely with what you're saying. If we truly want to walk as GPS, guide, position by the side with this next generation, we truly have to live that out. And they have to see it authentically in us before they're going to come alongside us.
That I agree. I just, I grew up probably being the most faith-filled person in my immediate family. And that marked me for life. And not that I have faith figured out at this point, but I realize it is so foundational to my existence that without my faith, my marriage will suffer. And without my marriage being thriving, my career will suffer. And I don't know if this generation understands how those 3 things are linked.
No, I don't believe they do at all. And I think it's so simple when you look at it. Everything is, as I said earlier, designed around serving self. What I want, when I want it, how I want it. And that's a complete contrast to what most religions are and what faith is based on. Faith is based on selflessness. But when you're on the throne, when you're the CEO, 24/7, everybody, including yourself, is 24 hours, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Everything is geared around making you happy and having you achieve everything you want to, which there's some really good things to that. It's very hard to find the need for somebody else and or a foundation of faith. The problem with it is we're looking at depression and suicide rates that are greater than we've ever seen. We're looking at loneliness off the charts, and part of that has to do with when you're not plugged in to something like a faith base, it is really difficult to truly find a meaningful life. And that's why we talk about this always becoming, because until you find your identity, you're always searching for that thing that gives you that inner peace, right? That is something that's global. And for you and I, we believe that that's faith. But what ends up happening if you don't find that connect, you're always becoming, and that restlessness drives people to such depression, to suicide, to loneliness. And it's incredible. It also makes people really self-centered and self-focused. And the more of that we see, the more it becomes the natural way, and it becomes approved, right? So you don't dare tell me who to be, because the space has already been created around me that's that way. We're not allowed to speak into other people's lives. So the stage is set for a new era. There's no doubt about it. From a faith and from a parenting and from a business perspective, it's certainly a crazy and interesting time.
So we've gone nearly 50 minutes, and wow. To me, it seemed like 20. It's just incredible. Stephen, you have been great to speak with. This has been lively. This has been engaging. I really appreciate you being on the show. But before I let you go, what I'd like to do is have you take the next couple minutes and speak directly to the current audience and those that will be watching on replay, and talk to them how to have a positive influence on the Millennial and Gen Z.
Sean, thank you. And I echo your sentiments. I've really enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you. My encouragement to everybody that's listening is to realize that when we talk about the next generation, they are not just teenagers going through a phase. They are teenagers going through a phase, but they also are fundamentally different to any generation we've encountered. And believe me, there's data to prove all of that. I know in this conversation it's hard to believe, but it's true on every level. That's why I joke that they're aliens, because when you see them as aliens, if there was an alien in my house today, I would try and figure out how to communicate with that alien, what they're like, how to feed them, and that's what I'm suggesting we need to do. We need to be deliberate parents and deliberate leaders. And that's a really big deal. That's different than manipulating. That means proactively figuring out what are the things my son or daughter, my employee needs, and figuring out how to give that to them. And in most cases, in an invisible manner. In other words, when you want to teach them to problem solve, don't make them go out and hunt for their food, but figure out ways that they can actively practice those skills: problem solving, communication, gratitude, and perseverance. So I'm suggesting to you that as soon as you start that journey, the next step opens up to you. The first thing is just realizing that they truly are different, not because they're trying to be difficult, but because they've never been anything else. And for those of you who never read my book, what happens at the end of the book, I tell you that it's not them that are aliens, it's us that are the aliens. So they are truly the ones that are inhabiting this earth. And if we want to stay here, we've got to become a little bit more alien. So my encouragement to you is please see them differently, because once you do that, you will engage with them differently. And that starts a journey that I think is spectacular.
Phenomenal. I can't. And when is the book coming out?
Hopefully the end of summer. I'll be sure to send you one, Sean. Don't worry.
I want to see it end of summer. I am looking at that. Thank you. So everyone, this has been Litvak Leadership Live. Stephen, if you want to get in touch with Stephen, email address. But, since Stephen is reaching out to the Millennials and the Gen Z, he's all over Instagram. Get there too. Everyone have a blessed day, a great weekend. And hey, come see me at breakfast tomorrow. That's all for now.